Indeed. Happy Tuesday afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Great Quarter Gals. It is Tuesday. I'm Kaylee Nix here with Grace Sharkey, ready to get another great episode started. And Grace, I'm really excited about this one, from our news content to our guest content. This one is top tier, I think.
Yeah, I'm really excited too because we're going to hit on a lot of the stuff that I get to write about when we look at technology and some of the leading companies in that space. And then, of course, VC work. So it's about time that we got to get some female venture capitalists on here and talk about exactly what women are looking to invest in this space. So I'm very excited as well.
Absolutely. And not only are we talking about female investment in venture capital and partnerships and venture capital partners all over, we're also talking about how accessibility through automation is important in attracting different types of talent, whether that's gender different talent or ability different talent, making workplaces more accessible, making them more attractive to talent too. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation with our guest a little bit later on today. But Grace, before we get there, let's check up. What's been going on with you? What have you been writing about? Some exciting things coming out of the fingertips of Grace Sharkey lately.
Well, unfortunately, I have had to kind of focus a little bit of my attention on a number of our favorite freight tech, if not unicorns, over the past year, really tightening their operations, getting ready for the long haul during this recession that I would say we're pretty much. You'd say definition wise in at this point, not just a freight recession, but economic one as well. And so for me, it's exciting to see who's willing to make these moves the quickest in order to come out the other end a little bit stronger. I mean, here's the thing, like our generation, we saw the recession through our parents' eyes, right? We got to see a lot of their 401ks just slashed in half, a lot more of the same struggles, I think, people are seeing now in their own financial space. So it's interesting being at this age and being able to talk to the companies that are preparing for the future past this negative time period, right? And fortunately, I've been able to talk with a lot of leadership when it comes to Project 44, Baton, even Convoy, right, has had their own shrinkage. And at the end of the day, I think a couple of years from now, we'll see who the leaders are who made those bets and came out on top at the very end.
So that's definitely something that we've been keeping an eye on from your perspective of things from the news side. Love to hear that and know that you got your finger on that pulse. Let's get into our news topic for the day because, of course, this is a Great Quarter Gals. We talk about female leadership a lot and female leadership making strides in the industry, shattering those glass ceilings. And huge news from Cummins about 2 weeks ago with Jennifer Rumsey becoming the first female CEO to take over in nearly or over the 100-year-old company, that is. And this is, of course, massive in her shattering that glass ceiling, but it raises a good question. She raised a great question in her interview with our very own Alan Adler. How long is it going to be where these headlines are still newsworthy, where the first woman is still newsworthy? She raises a great question and some good points in her interview as well.
Yeah, and let's first off remember we are only about 100 years away from our gender being able to vote, right? And so, like, look how fast we've grown. Look how quickly females have just risen to the literal top in this situation. And I like that question. Of course, at the moment I saw it, I was like, I have to read this. And glad to see that Alan was behind it as well. And she brings up really interesting points in the fact that I think the way that not only is she raising her kids, I think a lot of our generation raised their children, their daughters as well. But just the fact that even a lot of her, she said, male counterparts were people that she turned to in order to grow and become the first CTO, first president, first operating officer, and then first CEO of the company as well. So it really showcases that you might not even, in her situation, this wasn't a role she was running for, right? But all of the work that she had put in, all of the extra time I'm sure she put in order to help get her career to where she is now, led her to being the perfect candidate for this position. So I thought it was really interesting how she went about that. How about you, Kaylee? What are your thoughts? I know you had a little bit of a critique or so possibly in there.
I don't even necessarily think that it's a critique. It's definitely not a critique towards Jennifer or Alan at all, more of just kind of the whole concept of women in the industry specifically. And, we do a lot of work here at Great Quarter Gals to highlight the successful accomplishments of women, but it's also it's a fine line that we walk between making them seem successful and focusing solely on the fact that they are women doing great things, right? We don't want to
Yes.
necessarily elevate women just because they're women. Like that's ancillary. They are, but it's because they're amazing
Yes.
leaders and are making great strides in this industry, regardless of their gender at all. And so I really, really want to hone in on that point. And I also want to hone in on something that Tom Linebarger said about Jennifer herself. He called her a once in a generation talent. And that's something that I think is a top tier compliment, especially coming from an outgoing CEO, and something that is not to be overlooked because Jennifer worked so hard to get to where she was. She's got a master's degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. She has incredible experience under her belt. And it raises a really good point to see her staying at a company now for nearly 3 decades and putting in the work to grind really hard to break these glass ceilings and move up and see that upward mobility. And so I just want to tell her congratulations. And also I love to see Tom himself giving her those compliments too and saying, you know what, she's a once in a generation. Doesn't matter that she happens to be a woman. And we're going to get to a point where women shattering glass ceilings isn't noteworthy or newsworthy just because it's happening all the time. That's the point where I want us to get to as well.
To kind of make a side point on that too, sometimes I think these roles might be granted to women to maybe like check a box, right?
Yep.
A lot of times women, I think, are they're like groomed almost in a way to take over these roles. And what it was really inspiring about hers is that like she even said like right out she wasn't ever trying to become CEO. And I think that's a really great point is that she followed her passion, which I think is more on that MIT technical side, right? Like being able to be that technical talent, but within that she developed the responsibilities or and the capabilities to become the CEO. So I
Hmm.
think for a lot of leaders out there, don't try to find that one in a million talent and then try to like have them become that position so that the company can look maybe a little bit better in someone's eyes. Let them naturally grow just like you would any man within a workplace. Let them run with their talents. I think that's really what he was trying to say is like she's someone that you can just let free and is going to really have an impact no matter what you do. And I think there's a difference between trying to place someone and fit a quota than just letting a woman excel in what she's absolutely incredible in doing and having them fall into this role instead of placing them into this role.
100%. And Grace, I love that we're ending on that. And I want us to get to our guest. But before we get there, we would be absolutely remiss if we did not finish up that final point by congratulating Shelley Simpson on her natural evolution into the president role at JP Hunt. So, Shelley, congratulations if you're watching this. You are an inspiration for that natural evolution of women in the workplace into that
Yes.
elevated leadership position. So, huge congrats to Shelley and the entire team at JP Hunt as well. And so, Grace, on that note, let's get into our conversation with our guest today. We're welcoming Aiden Madigan-Curtis, who is a partner at Eclipse Ventures, to our show. And we're talking a little bit about, as you mentioned, the venture capital space and the investment space, specifically when it comes to industry automation and how automation makes things accessible and attractive to diverse talent pools. So, Aiden, thank you for joining us today. It is great to have you on the show. And tell us a little bit about yourself and Eclipse Ventures.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, it's wonderful to meet you. And absolutely love the last conversation. Congrats to Jenny. Congrats to Jennifer. It's great to hear. Eclipse Ventures, we have about 2.7 billion under management. We focus on digital transformation of physical industries. So I feel pretty at home in the conversation here. We have a wide variety of portfolio companies. We do sort of very, very early stage all the way up through growth stage investing, and happy to get a little bit more into some of the companies that we've invested in and sort of what they've done in their individual spaces in a little bit. In terms of me, I spent the last 6 or so years actually as an executive at a company called Samsara in the industrial IoT space. I was the VP of operations there, owning like end-to-end operations, everything that sort of went into our COGS as well as support. And I also was a GM there working on industrial safety and using computer vision for safety. Before Samsara, I was on the team that launched the very first Apple Watch. So had a fair share of time kind of running around different parts of Asia, helping to bring up factories, and some kind of pretty hilarious stories from that experience as well. But we sort of ramped that from 0 to 1 million in parts in a very little amount of time. So all sorts of interesting experiences there too.
Yeah, you've really led the way when it comes to technology. And I guess over this last year, we've seen such an incredible focus when it comes to investment within freight tech, specifically in automation. A lot of those operations, back office pieces that just take up so much time and so much overhead. For you, what has been the most interesting investments within the space in regards to automation, and what different technologies have really captivated you over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been so interesting. I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen is actually the extent to which every single person has been really affected by supply chain and supply chain disruption these last few years. There was sort of not one individual who didn't have something lost in backlog in an Amazon order, or kind of lived through that COVID disruption. I think we've also seen just an unprecedented amount of disruption in supply chain. You've got climate change, you've got geopolitical issues going on. So it's been a time where these issues have been really front and center for everyone. I think what that's really done is sort of pushed the space. So, we went from a world where everyone was able to go to a store, pick up what they needed, to a world where we really had to rely on new technologies, enabling faster deliveries, faster manufacturing, to service our needs. So I think some of the key, things we've seen happen in the space that are really interesting are, first of all, within warehouse automation. I love actually kind of even going back several years, some of those really strategic investments by Amazon and Kiva or Shopify and Six River, those really led the way for a lot of the warehousing space to become much more faster, much more efficient, and allowed for an ecosystem to get built on top of them. For example, like an Appian doing low code, no code to enable the workplace, the workers actually within a warehouse to better interact with the robotics that are helping the warehouse work more efficiently. We've seen similar things in transportation with the advent of, like, for example, Samsara, in manufacturing with stuff like software-defined manufacturing, like with Bright Machines, which is one of our portfolio companies. And even with workplace safety, there's another portfolio company that we work with called Voxel, which is all about using computer vision to create kind of a safer, more efficient workplace. So I think we've seen a lot of change, especially in this space, and it's come from a very tangible set of experiences that everyone's had all together these past few years.
That safer and that more efficient workspace is something that automation is absolutely key in promoting across really all industries, but specifically across the physical industries. And we live in a world right now where companies are taking a hard look at their ESG goals, specifically at that S and the societal and the social goals that they are setting forth. And that includes opening up positions to people of all different abilities, all different backgrounds, all different education levels. And automation can be absolutely essential into making that workplace more accessible for folks who maybe have a different physical ability or who don't have the same technical background as before. Can you talk about how companies now see automation and investing in automation as a key step in hitting some of those ESG goals when it comes to building a diverse, accessible workplace or workforce?
Yeah, I love this question. So I'm a sort of 5'3", 100-pound person, and it's actually amazing to me to watch. I used to go do a lot of site visits when I was at Samsara. We were super close to our customers, kind of with them all the time, and I was very acutely aware of how kind of very small I was relative to the size and the scope and the hazards in those types of operating environments. And it's really neat to see a company, for example, like a Bright Machines, where some of the types of manual steps that could be handled by historically only a very large person, may actually be able to be handled by someone like me sitting behind a set of controls, actually maneuvering a manufacturing line, or even just writing a code to have that code operate a manufacturing line. So it's really neat to see kind of how far we can push the boundaries. And the other thing I would say is I love that it's opening up the opportunity for people to think about upskilling themselves. So, I think about kind of how I may have interacted in a manufacturing line historically. I love the notion of being able to push myself to say, I'm going to go actually learn how to work in a no-code, low-code environment to actually run something like a manufacturing line versus having to do everything physically myself. So I'm also really optimistic about how it's encouraging people to continue to push themselves as they interact with these physical industries.
That's really amazing. And I guess, how do you see 5, even 10, 15 years from now down the road, how do you see the physical industry space like looking over time? What changes do you see occurring that you might be investing in as well over the next 10 or so years?
Totally. I guess first of what I would say is I think that even though we've experienced a lot of disruption these last few years, these changes are going to be evolutionary, not sort of overnight revolutionary. It turns out that generally speaking, as technology gets adopted, there are ecosystem effects. So you think about, I mentioned earlier, the adoption of like a Kiva or a Six Rivers at sort of major warehousing or shippers. Eventually people trying to interact with those robots realize they need, I mentioned the low code, no code environment, they need better tools to kind of enable more of their workforce to interact with the benefits that technology
Yeah.
can bring. You think about something like the transportation landscape, and I think about my experiences at Samsara, starting out with telematics, that was just the very tip of the iceberg. Our customers were then asking us to do electronic bill of lading. They were asking for dash cameras. So you kind of see the opportunity to fan out once you really get a foothold in and as these physical industries begin to transform. So I think that's how it's going to happen. I think that it will be an evolutionary process, but I actually think it's very top of mind for everybody right now. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's never been more apparent how ripe these industries are for this style of evolution. And we're super excited to be a part of it with the companies that we've invested in and are helping to grow along the way.
With that automation kind of excitement, I guess I would call it, that it kind of permeates the entire industry right now. There's also some hesitancy, as there is with all change, and there's some roadblocks laying in place as well. What would you say are some of those systemic things that are happening in the industry that are both very encouraging for automation investing, but there are also some systemic roadblocks that are maybe holding it back a little bit from where it could be?
Sure. I think to talk first about some of the tailwinds, we have a real national priority right now to bring, for example, a significant amount of manufacturing and supply chain diversification back to either kind of onshore or nearshore. When you think about how everything from active pharmaceutical ingredients to fertilizers and different food products gotten created. People talk a lot about the computer or cell phone examples, but it's really actually everything that we've looked to the rest of the world to help us build, manufacture, ship, and deliver over these last couple of decades. And I think that we're living sort of through a very fascinating time where companies and company leadership are really actually much more able to weigh the risks of having either single sourced or very sort of brittle one-way supply chain. So I think we're seeing a major tailwind in decision makers being able to really weigh the benefits of, perhaps a CapEx decision that may have historically been considered too expensive. I think now people are beginning to say, okay, I know how much cash I had to take off my balance sheet to go shore up a ton of component supply, many countries away to make sure that I got that supply. Is there a way that they can be doing that differently here? Or, they know the feeling of lost revenues by not having inventories available when customers wanted to buy. So decisions are getting a lot more rational. And I think in many respects and across many of these physical industries, much more of, there's been sort of much more of a focus and an effort on how you get that supply chain diversification here. So I think that's the tailwind. I think, as a function of that, some of the barriers that we're facing are talent. I think we need absolutely more people, and we need sort of people skilled in the right direction to serve these physical industries. I think we have something like 2 million manufacturing jobs that are going unfilled today. And I think what I'm most excited about too is not only kind of bringing technology to play to help make these operations more efficient, but also the criticality of these industries being very front and center. Hopefully, you mentioned sort of diversity of people, like attracting a more diverse set of talent that can actually access the ability to participate in these physical industries through these types of technologies.
I think that's an incredible point, especially, I mean, you look at the jobs needed for integrations between systems, the jobs needed for automation, the
Exactly.
jobs needed for autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, just like list every new technology. Every single one needs that talent, that diverse talent behind it. And I guess from your perspective, doing your job and seeing all these changes and focus on technology over the last couple years, has your job changed in any way to make sure that eclipse or even your own personal goals of reaching that diversity is met?
Such a great question. And as you were talking about all of the ways in which people can participate in these physical industries, I also thought about throwing in cybersecurity. For example, I think some of our critical infrastructure is actually the most at risk, and I think we've seen the most under attack. So cybersecurity is in there too, and those roles can really be done by skilled workers from any background and from any place. So that's a good one too. In terms of the nature of my job, something you were talking about earlier in this segment really resonated with me. And I think about the progress that I made personally at Apple or at Samsara or even at Eclipse here. For me, it was always about just being focused on delivering results. And I have a ton of energy, and I've always loved just sort of really staying laser focused on the goals of the company. And as a function of that was that, and maybe a few sleepless nights and some broken nails and stuff along the way, was able to also rise up as a leader. And I think that what I love about the way these industries are shifting is it is exactly that. It's technology is really enabling people of all types of backgrounds, as long as they are kind of really focused on delivering results. Whether it's Jennifer or me, as thankful to those companies I've gotten the chance to work with, there really are fewer barriers, I think, and I hope, than there ever have been. And I also think it's great to kind of get out there and talk about it and say, if you focus and if you push yourself and if you stay really laser focused on what your company is trying to achieve, it's hard to say no to progress in that respect.
And that's exactly what we hope to do with a platform like this, is to show that those barriers are decreasing in number and really decreasing in size too for barriers to entry. And so with that, Aiden, we've got about 3-ish minutes left in our show today. What would you say to women who are looking to build something different in supply chain and get into supply chain, whether from a resiliency standpoint or from they have a great idea and they want to make it work? And then how also do you encourage them to be passionate about it, just as you are? I could really feel the passion just through the TV screen right now, which is exciting to see. But what would you say to women looking to build something different in the supply chain space? And then how do you encourage them to not just sit on their passion, but to make it known and to put it out there?
Yeah, I love this question. So thank you for asking it. Um, First and foremost, I would say there are so many problems to solve. So welcome to the club. Get on in. I can't wait for you to get here. And then I would, just want to share a little bit about some of the most successful founders I think that we've seen and that we've worked with, and either here at Eclipse or observed. So many great founders to observe as well in many companies across these spaces. And so, first and foremost, I would say you've got to really understand what problem you're looking to solve, and make sure that, I know that sounds kind of really obvious, but actually it's way harder than you think. So often, people will come up with a great solution or a great technology and go looking for the problem. The most successful founders I've ever met are those that really understand a key pain point within one of these industries and wants to pull together just a world-class team to go develop kind of the smartest solution to that very specific pain point. And when you do that, you realize you've got a very willing, ready set of buyers, because you're solving, a VP of operations key pain. When I think about, dots on a map for fleet telematics, or you're solving a fleet manager's problem if she or he or they want to know, the safety scoring of their drivers on the road. So you really have to be out there solving a key pain point. And the most authentic founders, I think, are the ones who know that space really well and are able to just wrap around them a killer team that complements them. I think another thing the best founders do is realize that nobody is perfect. And so you want to kind of really be super self-aware, know where you absolutely shine. The best founders we meet all have superpowers of some type or another, but no one with that style of superpower is great at everything. So go find the next couple of people who are really going to make that A+ team, and then go get after it.
Love that. Incredibly empowering. And I really appreciate you coming on today. I think that you've given some really incredible advice, especially for being in VC. We don't get a lot of moments to talk to women within that field. So it's just a really good chance for our audience, I think, to learn from you as well.
Thanks.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it very much. Great chance to chat with everybody here, and hopefully we got to do it again. It's been awesome to chat with you guys.
Absolutely, Aiden. Thank you so much for joining us today. And go give her a connection on LinkedIn. I've been following your LinkedIn for a while now, and it's a great place to get some of that information and find them at Eclipse Ventures also. Grace, I love this episode. Every single piece about it spoke to my heart. Amazing. A+ job for both of us, and for Jennifer Rumsey, and for Aiden, and for Shelly Simpson too.
Yes. No, really, really incredible episode. I'd love to see her speak at a Freightways event. She's really incredible. And yeah, love doing the show with you, Kaylee. Always a good day on Tuesdays.
Always a good day. We'll see you guys next Tuesday.
1, 2, 3, ho!